Good morning. It's June 20th, 2012. This is David Plazas, Community Conversation Editor of the News Press, and we have the privilege of having with us Chauncey Goss, who is a candidate for the District 19 congressional race. We want to thank you very much for being here. And before we begin with the questions, editorial board member, would you please introduce yourselves for the record?
Kate Gooderham, Fort Myers. Pam Grothhouse, Benita.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Goss, why are you running for this office?
I'm running, the simple reason that I'm running is because right now we're saddling our children and future generations with unsustainable debt, and I'm not comfortable watching that debt accrue at the rate it is because we're setting our children up for failure. And this country has a really rich tradition of leaving the next generation, better than the last generation, and we're in jeopardy of doing that. And the reason I'm running is because I've had experience working on these issues for the last couple of years. I've worked on federal fiscal policy for the last decade, and I can hit the ground running in D.C. and can make a difference quickly to start working on some of these issues.
And right now, as I believe this is a first-time candidacy, is that correct?
That is correct.
Any surprises?
I don't think I appreciated how all-consuming running for anything would be, and I have tremendous appreciation for anyone who runs for anything. And I sort of take my hat off from dog catcher to president. It's you have to give all of yourself to the process. You cannot run part-time. It is a 100% endeavor, and I've really enjoyed it.
Tell us a little bit about your connection to Southwest Florida as an adult. Certainly the Goss name is very well known in Southwest Florida, but tell us what you've learned, what's different from the time you've grown up, and how you expect to serve your constituents, and how you might differentiate yourself from the others.
Sure, absolutely. I did grow up here, and I've spent 31 of my 46 years as a resident of Lee County. When I got done with graduate school, I went to Georgetown up in D.C. and got a master's in public policy, and I've always been interested in policy. And I came back to Florida after graduating and started working in Boca Grande, which is a community up in northern Lee County. And I ran their property owners association, and when I did that, I had the opportunity to serve on the Lee County Parks and Recreation Board, the Lee County Coastal Advisory Council, the Lee County Historic Preservation Board, the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program. FGCU was just being founded at the time, and I served on, I think, one of the first foundation boards for them. So I was very involved in the community, and I was very lucky to have that opportunity to be able to do that as a representative of the Boca Grande community to Lee County and these citizens advisory boards. I don't think Lee County has changed a lot since then. This was in the mid and late 90s. We've certainly grown a little bit, certainly in Estero, Bonita, that area has grown quite a bit, Pam, from when I was here. But the important things about Lee County are still the important things about Lee County, and that's quality of life. The reason people come here is because of the quality of life you enjoy here, and I think it's incumbent on us as elected officials or potential elected officials to make sure that we protect that quality of life and recognize why people come here.
I have a question about the debt, the unsustainable debt, and the impact of Social Security and Medicare on that.
Yeah.
And as you know, probably as early as today, we might hear a Supreme Court ruling on whether the Affordable Care Act is going to be struck down as unconstitutional, the individual mandate. Mm-hmm. And woven into the Affordable Care Act is the Medicare improvements for seniors that have been highly touted. So if that is struck down and you're elected to Congress, where will you be with the rest of the guys in Congress on what to do next with Medicare if those improvements are gone? And
yeah, the one thing about the Affordable Care Act, or APACA, is that it takes about $500 billion out of Medicare, so it robs pretty heavily from Medicare. I would not be upset to see it struck down by the Supreme Court, and if it isn't struck down and I am elected, I would support full repeal of it. I don't think it's a very good bill. In fact, I think it's an awful bill. So what would I do? Because I don't think that health care is sustainable right now. Or actually, no, it's not sustainable, and it needs fixing. Our health care in this country right now, it's the best in the world, but it's a broken system, or it's a flawed system. And the reason it's flawed is because it's spending way too much money, and we can't afford it. So what we need to do is fix it. And the way you'd fix it, I would support something. There's a plan called the Ryan-Wyden plan, which is something that Paul Ryan and Ron Wyden, who's a senator from Oregon, and Paul Ryan is the chairman of the Budget Committee, and he's a member from Wisconsin. I worked for Paul for a long time. They put together this plan, and it basically changes Medicare, and it goes to something called premium support, and introduces a little bit more of a free market system into Medicare, because right now the federal government is the negotiator rather than the 30 to 50 million seniors, and it would be probably market-wise much better to have those seniors actually doing the negotiating with the insurance company than the federal government.
Now, detractors of that plan say, this is bad for seniors because it's going to be the end of traditional Medicare and so on and so forth. And isn't it true that it wouldn't impact anybody who's already getting Medicare?
The plan that Mr. Ryan, Mr. Wyden, and certainly I support would not touch anybody over 55. So this is for the future, and it has to be fixed. When you say Medicare as we know it is not going to exist in the future, and that's the thing. Right now, there's a straw man that we keep putting up, and it's fake, that says it's either this or it's Medicare in the future, which is this extrapolated out. Medicare in the future doesn't exist. It goes broke, or it makes the country go broke. So something has to give. So you can't just say, if we don't do anything, it's this versus your plan, and your plan's worse because it actually makes some changes. No, it has to be changed. And that's something that the Ryan Wyden plan does. And there's some other, actually there aren't any other plans, that we need more plans. And that's one thing I like about Ryan Wyden. It may not be perfect, but it's the only plan out there. And if you have a better plan, offer it up and let's get the discussion going. And that's what I like about Paul Ryan and working with him, was he put plans together. I was lucky enough to be able to help him work on them that push the ball down the field, that advocate the debate that needs to take place in this country to fix some of these plans like Social Security and Medicare, which are neither sustainable in their current form.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Goss.
Sir.
Good morning again. I'm going to put you on the spot right here in Lee County. We had a brief conversation in the lobby about how angry I am this morning about this 5-alarm fire that's burning in Dunbar, and nobody cares about it. People are giving lip service to it, but I don't see any emergency meetings being called by the county manager or anybody. The only passion that I see is from the people who have had their families slaughtered. You mentioned quality of life, protecting quality of life here in Lee County. Do you have any ideas about the inactivity from people who we are trusting to do something about this?
Yeah, I can't speak, and I won't speak to a county issue as to whether the county administrator, county manager ought to get involved, or whether what ought to happen on the city of Fort Myers and how they should get involved, because that's really their issue. But I think I can talk to the issue more on a larger scale, and I think it's sort of a breakdown of society in many ways, and I think that the federal government has many plans that have pushed that breakdown in society and allowed it to happen by not encouraging independence, by encouraging dependence. I read this story this morning, and I was just floored and amazed that there was a 3-year-old girl in a car at 4 o'clock in the morning. That was the first problem. The second problem was there was a 16-year-old girl in a car at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she was pregnant, and that's 2 problems. And the third problem was there was a 23-year-old man driving them around who was convicted of things, and unfortunately they're dead. But it shows that there's a real breakdown in the community to allow these kinds of things to happen. And I think part of that comes from a dependence that we encourage. And we need to get these people independent, and we need to, I think, encourage families to do a better job. And that's pretty much all I can say to...
So you don't feel offended by the fact that the people who we have in power now, that we're hoping will clean up the garbage in the streets there, I'm talking about the gangs that were in the same story that you're talking about, are not doing it?
I don't know whether I feel offended or not, but I certainly think that it's an issue for local government, yeah.
Related to that, how do you see yourself interacting with your constituents if elected to Congress? How often would you plan to be here?
Frequently.
How present? Tell us a little scenario. How might it be?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the questions you asked us, you said, what are your priorities? And I think my first priority I put down, actually I know my first priority I put down is constituent service. That's what you elect a member of Congress to do, is to serve you and to be your representative in Congress. And if you're not here, and if you're not talking to your constituents, you can't do that. And the way I see that working is it's a top-down process. It would come from me if I'm elected, and it would be my #1 priority, which would then trickle down to my staff to make sure they understand it's my #1 priority and it's their #1 priority. DC is a very confusing place, I think by design. It's very bureaucratic, it's very hard to navigate, and it's paid for with your money and my money to do that. So what we need to understand is your representative is your advocate, and your representative is your voice in Washington. And as such, if I'm elected, that's what I would do, is fight hard for the people here in Southwest Florida and for our issues here in Southwest Florida. I don't think you can do that as an absentee landlord, so I plan on being here as much as I can when we're not in session. I don't plan, if I win, this is presumptive, but if we win, I'm not moving my family back to Washington. We moved down here. This is my home. I'll be here as much as I can.
I have